Matt, what's up? Thanks for jumping on. First episode of Jays and Confused. I am both Jay and confused, so I'm apologies you didn't get more representation in the title.
I really thought that you were Jay and I was confused, and I had prepared
Ah,
for that to be my role, but it is a pleasure to be on.
if we can both be confused,
Yeah.
then that'll work.
I
All
mean, we're
right.
talking about the Boston Celtics this season, so I don't think that will be too difficult.
Difficult. Yes. Have you recovered from last night's embarrassment to the Utah Jazz?
Recovered is a strong word. You watch a game like that, you have a drink, you stare in the mirror, you have an existential crisis, and then at some point, you start to be like, well, there was one play where Jaylen Brown passed to Keita in the dunker
Your
spot
spot?
and in a nanosecond had it out to Hauser on the 3-point line. And I was like, wait a minute, that was ball movement. And so, like, you hang on to things like that. And so, like, in that sense, I think I've moved on a little bit past how heartbreaking that absolute crusher of a loss was.
Yeah, you watch the official NBA highlights, which remove all the bad parts. They weren't particularly long in this game. Um, I wrote down some takeaways just to start with a positive. We can go back and forth because I have
Hmm.
one positive and about eight negatives from this game.
Okay.
Jaylen Brown
Jaylen Brown.
finding ways to score. Went 0 from 9 from 3. He was shooting 46% going into this game from three, so he was going to regress at some point.
Yep.
But getting into the paint, isolating on Keontae George, setting screens the whole game. What did you make of him?
I thought it was a great game for him. I thought down the stretch, I was very impressed. I think what, and I'm sure we'll get into kind of the greater questions of the Boston Celtics this season, but I thought what my biggest takeaway was he is the obviously the centerpiece of our offense, our best scorer this season with Jason Tatum sidelined, but our most versatile scorer in a way that really matters for a team that lacks offensive versatility. I think watching him during that stretch in that fourth quarter, not just again focusing on trying to get the three going, but being able to get into that mid range, focus on those turnaround jumpers, those little pull up from the free throw line over a defender. I thought getting to the basket, getting to the free throw line, those are all things that I think are desperately needed in this offense. And so him being able to spot the trend in terms of our 3-point shooting in that game, which I believe in the 70 games in Celtics history where we have shot or attempted 53s, that was our worst 3-point shooting performance ever. So him being able to pick up on that and find other ways to score, I think was huge.
I think it is, and I think it's something that'll serve him later down the road. Where in this game, it was seemed like really a training wheels NBA star game. You're going up against the Utah Jazz. You have Keontae George on you, who's maybe the worst defender in the NBA. Is there a
Uh, Listen,
You don't need
Xavier
to
Tillman
answer
is
that right
putting up a
now.
case, but
You don't need to answer that at this moment. But not a ton of expectations on this team. Going up against not the best defensive team in the NBA. He can kind of work on the different parts of his game. And we've seen different seasons throughout Jaylen Brown where there was a stretch where he got all his points from coming around a screen and hitting a pull up, or he got all his points from posting up, or he got all his points from trying to dribble left-handed into three defenders. Like he's always had these strategies in isolation, but getting a season where he just gets to try out being a number one option and get his shot diet broken up in different ways, I think is going to be good for him.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
think this kind of defense was good in that sense of being able to explore a little bit and mix, like dig into your bag and see what you can pull out and see what works. I think great that he didn't pull out the dribble into three defenders with a left hand that doesn't exist option. I think as much as we can limit that is good, but I thought that it was a great showing in terms of how versatile of an offensive weapon he is. I do also think it was good maturity wise to see him not just, I think that has been an issue in the past in terms of, and I think part of that has to do with the overall offense in the past has been much more isolation heavy of like we were fortunate enough to have five guys who could just create their own shot, and so everybody did it the way that they knew how to do it. I think not having that option anymore, we have to be a little bit more creative in creating offense on our own, and Jalen finding different ways to do that I thought was huge.
No, that's true. Speaking of figuring out ways to create offense, because that's going to be something we haven't figured out outside of Jalen Brown yet. What did
Mhm.
you make of the Boucher at center lineups? Because that's something we haven't seen Missoula pull out yet, but something that I saw a lot of people projecting us. I saw a lot of people having Boucher as the starting center this year going into the year. We really haven't seen it a lot, and this was the first game we saw long stretches of it where it did seem to work.
Yes, and I think Boucher, it's going to take some time for that to become more of a fit. I think obviously one of, I don't know. I guess I'm gonna be the optimist here and say one of our greatest strengths is the flexibility that Joe Mazzulla has with the lineups this season. In that, and he's talked about,
What
like
a
opposing,
zag.
yeah, opposing coaches are not really gonna know how to prepare because they're not gonna know who's in the lineup minute to minute, game to game. There aren't going to be kind of set rotations necessarily. I think Boucher hasn't gotten much time or opportunity to kind of find his role in there, but I do like what he provides in terms of that kind of defensive anchoring at the center position. I think his shot blocking ability is, I mean, Keita has been fantastic in stretches, but I do think Boucher as just a pure shot blocker might be the best that we have right now, and I do want more of that element to our defense. We're not doing terrible in that respect. I think we're 10th in the league in blocks right now. So I think it really is going to come down more to how he fits within the flow of the offense and the defensive cohesively. And ultimately, what it's always going to come down to with this team as currently constructed is rebounding and how much he's able to impact the boards. But I am,
That's
yeah, I
when you
am
say that's
intrigued.
our biggest strength is coaches not knowing how to prepare, it makes me think of that Family Guy meme where Peter Griffin's dressed up as a clown and he's like, they're going to be looking for army guys. Like, but we have had success with that in the past. I remember there was a Brad Stevens season where Luigi Ditome just went off because nobody knew he could shoot threes. So just
They
having
were
these guys,
distracted by the man bun in that season, and I remember it well.
yeah,
Uh,
nobody thought they needed to guard him. And then he shot 42% from three, and we made the playoffs that year. For other reasons outside of Luigi, I like to give him a little bit more credit than maybe he
and most
deserves.
people do, correct? Yeah. But I do think our lineup versatility, if utilized properly, is a strength. And I think we've seen that early on in the season with the way that we're able to plug in and play guys based on matchups, based on what we're looking for specifically. Obviously, we've kind of talked a bit off mic about Ugo in that Knicks game and
Ugo.
kind of just like putting him on Jalen Brunson and seeing and Minot has been kind of a small revelation for us, especially his ability to crash the boards and just as a hustle guy. So I think lineup flexibility and being able to see how many pieces we do have, they might not be in terms of if we look at the NBA as we're playing chess games every day, we have a lot of pawns. They can't maybe all do the things that we would love them to be able to do all at once, but I think we can move them in interesting ways and combinations that fit the need as we play different teams and are looking for different things. It's some nights we're gonna need more of like that hustle guy energy. Some days we're gonna need Chris Boucher to step up and block more shots, and I think we have the ability to kind of play around with that.
Yeah, that's fair. One thing I couldn't stop thinking in this game is about our two most recent drafts, mainly because Kyle Filipowski was just eating our lunch for most of the second and third quarters.
Yeah, Western Mass raised him and then he did us like that, and it wasn't very nice.
Western Mass raised, well, to go back over our last two drafts, 2024, we have the 30th pick. Kyle Filipowski was dropping from a lottery pick due to the some off-court drama around his girlfriend and his girlfriend and mom fighting in the stands at Duke. There was some off to the side stories about that. Well, he's falling. Jason Tatum's tweeting out, somebody's got to pick this guy, voicing support for him. We take Baylor Shireman. Filipowski gets taken 2 picks later. Last year, we have 32nd pick. Everybody's saying Ryan Cockbrenner is going to be our pick. We need a center, averaged 20 points the year before at Creighton. We take a trade from the Pelicans to 4 seconds for our second, which is good value.
Great value.
Great value. Well, Ryan Cockbrenner right now started all 7 games for the Charlotte Hornets, leading the league in effective field goal percentage, averaging 9 and 6. That's a real player. And I'll usually always go for the real player over draft assets down the road. Because we took 2 of those second rounders this year in Amari Williams and Shulga. I don't know if either of those guys are going to play for us.
I I'm skeptical on that. I do think that that is there's a dual-edged sword to being as competitive as the Celtics have been in recent years, and I think now we're seeing the downside of it, especially the salary cap handicapping us the way it did, obviously off the heels of Jason Tatum's injury, made us vastly shake up our lineup in ways that obviously created a lot of holes. I do understand, again, especially at the value that we got for those picks, I understand the thinking of Brad Stevens of last year, 2 years ago, we were kind of 8, 9 guys deep and picking up guys, hoping to develop them when we didn't really have a ton of minutes to give them. I understand the idea of, well, we've got our core guys, we've got at that point last year, like one of the best benches, if not the best bench in the NBA. So feeling like there wasn't a ton of room to be giving to guys to see what they turn into, I do understand that. And we're now seeing the effects of, all right, well, we got handicapped by the salary cap the way we did. We had to shed some of our best players. Not only frontline guys like Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis, but losing like a Luke Cornett, and suddenly we're looking at our backcourt depth, our front court depth, and wondering, hey, where'd everybody go? And not only losing those guys, having Al Horford go in free agency, but not having backups really set in place. Keita, I think, did well in limited minutes, but all of a sudden starting the season being like, I guess that's our starting center, and we don't really have guys that we're like excited about coming up after him. And so now going into this season, wondering kind of, all right, well, it was a little bit like, yeah, Filipowski would have been great right about now, and it's a tough swallow.
Yeah, I definitely think there is a luxury we might have gotten used to over the last few years where we could say, we don't want to take the risk with Filipowski. We're going to go with a guy with no off-court problems like Baylor Shireman, who's a 5-year guy at college, coming out a little bit more ready, a little bit more developed. We knew he had an NBA talent in his three-point shooting, or saying we're going to take the value play and take more picks for 1 pick. I just don't know if we still have that luxury now that we have a little bit more of a depleted bench. We're a little bit more depleted when it comes to picks and future assets. That if we want to be competitive over the next 3 years, we need to start taking the guy that fits the team right now instead of, I don't want us to talk ourselves into a 2 timeline future at all when we have Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum entering their prime on this team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think part of it is ultimately having that luxury, but also the positions that we had it in of having Kristaps Porzingis, Al Horford, and Luke Cornett turn into what Luke Cornett did. Um, Shireman, I think just in the NBA that we exist in now, that kind of like 3-point sharpshooter who can like play a little bit of defense is just such a highly prioritized position, especially for teams that are like, we have our stars, we need to surround them with this prototype, and feeling like we had set the big man position relatively covered. Uh, I think centers have just not been as highly valued in recent years in the NBA as they have been in the past, and I think part of that probably attributed both to Filipowski's slide as well as to why we might not have picked him in addition to kind of the off-court stuff. But I think we're seeing now what happens when you prioritize, hey, we can get some wings who can shoot and have a ton of those guys and not much else. And then you're relying on them always kind of consistently shooting, which they might not always do, as we're seeing with this team.
Yeah, and I'm still a Shireman truther. I'll defend Shireman when I need to. Um, because even
As
going
long as
back,
Shireman can defend when he needs to.
he can defend a little. He can his boxy Hanes t-shirt gives him more weight so he can stay in front of guys.
We'll chalk it up to that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I think that's part of it. Last takeaway I had, is Tillman okay? Like on a human to human level. I I like Xavier Tillman. I really wanted us to trade for him when he was in Memphis. And I remember there was a headline going into this season where Tillman said, he had dropped down 12 pounds from last year and his knee swelling had gone down about 40% day to day, which, if your knees are still swelling
At
every day,
60%.
it's
Yeah.
60%. And I remember last year, he just had the bags of ice every day. Is there an argument that we should sit him for a few weeks? I mean, what's your takeaway on Tillman?
Absolutely. So I was a Xavier Tillman. I don't know if truther, but I really liked that acquisition for us. I really liked him in Memphis. I thought here's a big who can move. Again, this was pre-bags of ice, but he showed a lot of things that I thought would be an asset to any NBA team. Right now, I think what I'm concerned about when you say is Xavier Tillman okay? In addition to kind of, I think sitting him for a little bit, playing Boucher more and experimenting more with lineups and seeing how our kind of different bench bigs can slot in and help different rotations. Um, I think he just looks lost a lot of the time on the court. I think he makes a lot of just kind of mistakes without a ton of explanation behind it. And that's something that I don't know. Like we saw some of it last season in the limited minutes that he got, but it feels new that he just seems a little bit out of it. And I don't know if that's all can be chalked up to the injury, but it's tough watching.
To me, he looks like he knows where he is, but he can't move to where he's supposed to be. So there was a play where Walton Clayton Jr. last night just blew by him. And I think it was Scal on the broadcast who said, like, what an athlete. When no disrespect to Walton Clayton Jr. I couldn't blow by Xavier Tillman, but if you're playing in the NBA, you probably can blow by Xavier Tillman right now. I mean, I know
Yeah.
you were texting me about his play last night. Without looking at a box score, how many minutes do you think he played?
Here's the thing that is weird about Xavier Tillman is like I would guess probably 8 to 12, but it felt like 25 and none of them were good.
He played 6 minutes, and,
Okay.
and he was a minus 10 in those 6 minutes. So I don't think 6 minutes can be said to have determined the outcome of the game. But the fact that those 6 minutes were loud 6 minutes really says to me we might be better off going with a Boucher at center lineup or um, even giving Amari Williams some run just to see what we have there. Even if he's gonna make mistakes, he's a rookie. Um, but just try something else out.
Yeah, and again, I think the fact that he had an off season, lost some weight, took some pressure off the knees, and still is experiencing swelling to some degree. I mean, it is concerning that it doesn't feel like necessarily like just resting is an answer to that. I don't know what's going on with his medical stuff, but I don't hate the idea of just let's see what else works right now and give him some time to recuperate if that's necessary, and if not, just kind of being more selective with his minutes and who we put around him. Maybe try some two big lineups against again. Utah was playing three bigs at one point yesterday, and it's like, okay, I don't know if Yusuf Nurkic is blowing by Xavier Tillman, so maybe putting Keita and Tillman out there together against those three big lineups, they're not overwhelming us with athleticism. So trying something like that where we're able to kind of control or mitigate some of the stuff that can happen when he's on the floor until maybe he gets healthier.
Yeah, Joe did try a few of the bigger lineups earlier in the season, and it seemed like it really jumped up the offense to me. Where if you have Nemise Keita, Chris Boucher, and a Josh Minot out there, even if the next two players are Derek White and Jaylen Brown, every time those guys drive into the paint, it looks like they're about to pass out, and then they go, "Oh, that's Josh Minot. This isn't going to lead to anything." And then there's that hesitation where they get in the paint and they go, "Where do I go? There's only one other shooter on the floor."
Yeah. And I think this gets to ultimately what is it's tough to say that something like that junks up the offense when sometimes the offense is just junk. And I think this is going to be, I mean, we've been hearing it for years about kind of Missoula ball that the Celtics shoot too many threes. And I think that's an oversimplification. I think there have been many kind of responses to that, reasonable ones that are like, hey, a lot of those threes are really good shots. Like, you can't love them when they're falling and hate them when they're not. That's just sometimes in basketball, the good shots don't go in. I think that fundamentally like misunderstands that it's about how the rest of the offense works to set up those threes. And right now we don't have any options. I thought watching, for example, Keontae George yesterday, who's 21 years old, he had a great game. He's been on
Oh, yeah.
he's been on a great streak. Great streak. I guess this season he's been great this season. Um,
Last few, he's been a big bright spot for the Jazz.
yeah, and so I think, but watching again, he's 21 years old and had more versatility in his offense yesterday than our entire offense did, in terms of he was hitting some pull up threes that were impressive and everything, and he was getting open and taking open shots. He also was just forcing his way into the paint, challenging our defense to stop him, taking the free throws when they couldn't, getting to the free throw line. I think that's an element that when you're able to do that, you're creating pressure on the defense to need to collapse to protect the paint and do all those things. Right now on our offense, there really isn't. And I did text you at one point yesterday. I'm gonna set a timer and see how long it takes before we run a single backdoor cut. And I did give
Is
up at
Josh
one point.
Minot on the floor when you
If
set that
he's not on
timer?
the floor, that timer's running, and
Because
that's it.
he's backdoor cutting constantly. It's kind
Yes.
of his only tool in his toolbox.
And I do think that is why we've seen, oh damn, Josh Minot is like proving really valuable this year. And it's kind of it seems like it's taking some people by surprise, especially given that, oh, he's not a three-point shooter. He's not what the Celtics the last few years have been relying on to get their boost. He's giving us that boost because he's not a three-point shooter and he's finding other ways to impact the game. And I think that needs to be spread throughout the entire team for us to be able to have an effective chance at putting out any lineup out there and being able to scrap our way to good opportunities. Right now, again, if you put out Jaylen Brown and Derek White and three other guys, there is an extent, and again, I think this is something that was great about seeing Jaylen yesterday utilize more tools in his toolbox, but you kind of know it's going to be screen, drive, kick, three, screen, drive, kick, three, screen, three at the top of the key. And like it's the most predictable offense in the world. And we had the shooters and the playmakers to back it up in recent years. Right now, we just don't. And we need to expand our toolbox as a team.
Yeah, a lot of it's about just finding ways to create gravity. So in past years, so much of the gravity has come from the three-point shooting that when we kicked it around the perimeter, every person that touched the ball, the other team needed to close out to. When you had Hauser in the corner to Derek White to Peyton Pritchard to Jaylen Brown, every single time one of those guys touched the ball, it was an emergency for the defense. Now, if Derek White catches it in the corner, it seems like his habit is still just to kick it around the perimeter. But when he's kicking it to Josh Minot and then to Neemias Queta, the defense can just stay where they're at. They don't have to react to that, and then we're just playing catch around the outside. Next, we're going to go into highlights, lowlights. So we'll go back and forth drafting, highlights, then lowlights. So I'll let you go first. What has been the thing you're most excited about so far this season?
The thing I'm most excited about this season, um, I do have to say, I think it genuinely is. So this is something that we've been friends for over 10 years. 10 years ago is around when I started watching the Celtics somewhat religiously. And I love the feeling again of not relying on talent to win. I think it opens up a huge opportunity. As a fan, it's really exciting, but also just in terms of like watching great basketball, I think it forces a team to rely more on things like hustle, on things like the gritty plays. Like I grew up as a Celtics fan, really, like watching Marcus Smart dive for loose balls and Josh Minot becoming like a big part of what we're trying to do just to stay alive this season, I think is a positive for me. I think developing a culture where it's moving away from that. Well, we've got five shot creators who can all kind of create their own shots, so we're gonna, let them do that. It did, I mean, it got us a championship, and there's no complaints about that. But it straight up isn't always as much fun to watch as a team that feels like it has to play hard to compete every single night. And so I love having that next man up mentality, that reliance on versatility, that kind of plug and play guys, and you never know who's going to go off on a given night or who we need to go off in order to win a game. Or, as was the case last night, lose a game. But I think we're still seeing kind of and also I think tying into that is just the reliance on development again and being excited about which guys are gonna pop has been a big highlight for me this year.
Yeah, I had this as one of mine where I wrote it down as finding diamonds in the rough slash this team is for the sickos.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly. Where in past years, if I wanted to see Hugo Gonzalez play, I would need somebody to get injured for that to
You would need
happen.
no, you would just need to go to Maine.
I would need to go to Maine
Y-
or have a bus get stranded on the way to the game.
Yeah.
Something crazy would need to happen for me to see some of these guys play basketball. Um, I went to the Knicks game earlier this year with a group of friends who were all Celtics fans, but not maybe as into the team as we are. And one of them asked me, like, why should I follow the Celtics this year? And I said, Hugo Gonzalez has really big hands.
Yep.
I don't think I sold him on watching the team, but you get to learn. Everybody in the NBA has a superpower of some sort. This is what Brad Stevens used to talk about when he was coach, where he would, find an Evan Turner who is incredibly efficient from one area of the mid-range. And then he would have to come up with plays to get Evan Turner open in the mid-range. Never would have tried getting Evan Turner open in the mid-range if the team didn't need that for their offense. And this year, I'm looking forward to finding little things like that where, the we're gonna find little skills that Hugo and Josh Minot have that can complement our offense. And we haven't had that for a few years.
Yes, 100%. I'll never forget there was probably a 3 to 5 game stretch, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, where like Marcus Smart and Greg Monroe had the best pick and roll lob chemistry I've ever
Just throwing it
seen.
over, catching
Yeah.
it, laying it
And
up.
like no one who just kind of it's a rare few who think to that as like what does Celtics basketball look like? And it is those like it's the little things more than it is again, the step back threes when Jason Tatum hits a game winner are amazing and I'll take it every time, but it is those little things of like who was it in yesterday's game? It was Derek White who drew an offensive foul late in a close game, and the announcers immediately were like, he pulled a
Hold on,
Marcus
Marcus.
Smart.
Did you see Hugo get the charge where he didn't fall down?
Yes. Yeah.
That was a beautiful play.
And I think, again, I love the phrasing of this team is for the sickos, but I do think like it's that kind of energy, it's that kind of thing that like makes people fall in love with a team more than just. I'm trying to think of I mean, I you haven't lived around Boston in a few years. I think I've been going to TD Garden. I was at the game where we won the championship. I've heard TD Garden louder than when we won the championship against during a regular season game against Oklahoma City when they were tanking, when Marcus Morris hit a game winner. It was one of the loudest things I've ever been a part of. And I do kind of miss that energy. There has been a kind of the Celtics maybe have gotten more popular in the city. The more stars that we added, the more kind of when Porzingis was around and Drew Holiday and all of that. But it did feel like a little bit of the heart of it had been cut out. And I think we're finding again by necessity when you don't have that much talent, you have to look for the heart.
This is a bit of a tangent, but did you keep watching to see the Portland LA game last night?
I did not. I passed out
Really?
immediately as I wallowed in the disappointment of that non-call on the trip.
It was one of those games where I wouldn't recommend going back and watching it to anybody but you. But
I don't know what
uh,
that says about me, but I appreciate it.
Luca was out, LeBron was out, Austin Reeves was out, Scoot Henderson was out. So it was just Marcus Smart and Drew Holiday going mano a mano, tough
That
guy
game
to
was
tough
made
guy.
for me. Yeah. I will be watching that immediately after we
And
finish
it's
recording.
been so long since I've seen Marcus Smart do everything for a team and nothing for a team all at once, where he was
Yes.
getting the hockey assists. He made DeAndre Ayton look like a all-star center. Rui and DeAndre Ayton ended up with just like crazy stat lines, but it was because Marcus Smart was drawing three defenders and kicking to them and diving on the floor. and just locking guys up, causing deflections. And then on the other end, it was just Drew Holiday doing the same. And it made me wistful for Celtics teams of old.
Yeah, and I do think in some ways this team is an homage, is a forced flashback to like again, you mentioned earlier Luigi Ditome, like we grew up in an era where like the Celtics just straight up did not have talent to win on talent. It was like you gotta figure out how to get Avery Bradley backdoor cuts. And you gotta so like we will, I'm sure that we will be referencing many of those kind of teams of old because the things that they had, like we got to a lot of conference finals and we couldn't get over the hump. Again, LeBron was in the way, and there was just straight up a talent deficit in some of those years. But we found ways to get into the conference finals almost every year on just hustle and finding gritty ways to win that did not look the same every single night. And I think this team, if it tries to win the same way every single night, will really, really struggle throughout the course of the year. I think one of the highlights, as we're talking about, is we have the opportunity to find a whole bunch of ways to win. And some of those nights is going to be Hugo Chavez and his Hugo Hugo Gonzalez and his big hands just hustling and diving for loose balls and picking up steals all over the place. I think some games is going to be Josh Minot having 14 rebounds randomly out of nowhere. I think we have really cool tools that we can weaponize like that. And so it's going to be really exciting to see how this team kind of works on putting those all together and figuring out if we can have a coherent kind of strategy or a set of 10 strategies that we can use depending on the game.
Yeah, and we also just came out of a period where we weren't as locked into big contracts, where the last, 10 years, it's really been cycling through a handful of all-star players, where at point guard we went from Rondo to Isaiah Thomas to Kyrie Irving
Boo.
to the obligatory Kyrie Irving boo, but to
Yep.
Kemba Walker, where this team and the next few years are going to remind us a lot more of the old Celtics Big Three era, where we were locked in on those Pearson Garnett contracts and Ray Allen to a certain extent. So anybody we added needed to be on a value deal and getting, 6 rebounds out of Leon Poe one night might make the difference. And getting Eddie House to go off or Brian Scalabrine to hit three threes. Those are the things at the fringes that are going to make the big differences. So this year, as many of those guys as we can find who 2 years from now are going to have those games where they push us a little bit over the edge is going to be one of the maybe the few bright spots of the season.
Yeah. And again, I think we mentioned this earlier, but having those guys being able to develop, finding the diamonds in the rough, like it's just going to be fun to see which one of those guys pops, and not all of them will, and some of them Xavier Tillman might drive us a little nuts, but
Any minute now.
I yeah, I think it'll be exciting to watch those guys. I do think I don't know what other highlights do you have? Because I have
Yeah.
one that I'm thinking of, and I want to see if we're on the same page here.
All right. So number two, we got into this a little bit in the game recap, but I'm just gonna take Jaylen Brown's performance. I mean, he's shooting splits are 54% from the field, 46% from three. Still playing lockdown focused defense. He has that thing where he's trying to guard the best player on the other team and even trying to take out the other team's best rebounder sometimes, where he'll jump on a Joel Embiid or he'll jump on some of these big plotting centers when they're killing us on the boards to just say, I'm boxing out that guy. And I think having him just give a shit about this season is going to matter, especially when it comes to leadership of the young guys like the Hugos, like the Baylors, even though that they might hear outside noise that this is a lost season or that we're tanking, as long as Jaylen Brown's giving that effort on a night-to-night basis, this team's still going to show up and try.
Yeah, Absolutely. I had written down Jalen's efficiency and versatility. Um, yeah, I think having him be an elder statesman at like what 28 years old or something like that. I think him being able to understand that. I think him also having the experience of coming up on teams where we weren't expected to win every game. I think is going to be a big part of it. Of he's been here before and been part of teams that had to scrap to win, and I think that was something that came out when he kind of dug into his bag and pulled out those. Oh, what was I using to score 5 years ago? What was I using to score 7 years ago? Um, yeah, I thought that was huge. And again, I do think, I don't believe that he thinks of this as a lost season or anything like that.
No.
I also don't buy that narrative. I think like this isn't, the league maybe has more talent than it ever has before at the top. I think this team is not showing it right now and needs help in certain areas and needs to put it together, this team can make the playoffs. Like, I don't have
Yeah.
any kind of doubt about that. We have Jaylen Brown and Peyton Pritchard and Derek White, and we have good pieces around those guys that maybe haven't all clicked into place yet, but I don't think it's ridiculously optimistic to say, like, yeah, they need to figure some stuff out. But yeah, even if Jason Tatum doesn't come back this season, I don't see why we can't make a run. And maybe some people want it to be a tanking year. I think the way the lottery works out and everything, I don't see a ton of value in that. I think in terms of kind of, I don't want to give guys bad habits. I think something that really stuck with me was Derek White looked so sad in his post-game press conference yesterday. And I don't want a season of Derek White looking that sad, if I'm being honest.
I never want Derek White to be sad. I want Derek White to always be happy. Um, but I think this team is going to have growing pains. There's going to be games like this where we should have won and we didn't. And I think Jaylen Brown taking over down the stretch and trying to make this game matter. Because going back to your obligatory boo of Kyrie, imagine when Jaylen Brown was coming into the league, the leader on his team was Kyrie, who was, going out and publicly blaming him for losses. Can you imagine if Jaylen Brown went to the microphone after this game and was like, man, Baylor's got to try better? Like,
Yeah.
could you even see that from him? No, he's gonna own losses. He's gonna be the leader of this team. And I think seeing him step up like that has just been huge.
I think also going back to what you just said about making this game matter and stepping up in that clutch time, and something that has plagued the Celtics for the entire past decade that I've been watching has been like this struggle with fourth quarters and leads and blowing leads. And I think like every team goes through it to some extent. It feels like it's plagued the Celtics more than others at times of like, how did you blow that lead? How did you not be able to pull it out in the fourth quarter? And obviously, in the past couple of years, we had the star power to be able to like overcome that in clutch time. But I thought it was huge the way they competed. That fourth quarter very nearly got out of control. Utah went on a run, and it would have been very easy for this team to kind of see like, hey, our threes aren't falling tonight. We don't have a huge like fallback in terms of an offensive strategy. Like it might just not be our night. And the refusal to give up, the Derek White looking to draw offensive fouls, the Jalen looking for different ways to score, looking for steals that we could do. Like I thought it was huge that we were determined to stay in that game for a team that is right now just three really, really great players and a collection of kind of role guys and guys who will see what they turn into.
Yeah, and we're really one missed tripping foul call away from having a different result there. So we should have won that game by 20. I mean, we're a much more talented team than the Jazz. So I'm not trying to blame it all on that foul, but I still want to be a little bit more process minded. Brad Stevens, Kaizen master,
Yeah.
than to just say we lost. So there's no nothing good to take from it. But yeah, Jaylen Brown's been awesome in pretty much every game this year. What's your second bright spot? And was that the one you were thinking of?
It was. It was Jalen's
Okay.
efficiency and versatility and kind of his development as I'm gonna step up and become the number one guy right now and not just embodying that in terms of scoring, but being able to and again, like he hasn't been fully healthy. Like it was a
Yeah.
couple games ago that it was like he's questionable, he's not. So he's also still finding his stride like a lot of guys are this early in the season. Um, but I think the efficiency part of it is huge. Love him getting to the free throw line late in the game. Love him getting into the paint. I think that is the dimension that sorely needed on this team. We are dead last in the. This is not a highlight, but we are dead last in free throw attempts by like a wide margin. Um, and so I think him seeing that and being like, all right, well, I'm gonna get us to the line if I have to right now. I think is a development and a testament to kind of how he's grown as a player as well and recognizing the situation.
Him and Peyton Pritchard seem to be the only guys who can get into the paint right now. And Pitch Pritchard really can't get to the rim. I mean, he's 6'1", so that's a little bit understandable. But Derek White used to be much more of a slasher. I had this as a low light, but I'll jump to it. The Anthony Simons experience. Last 3 seasons, he was 65% at the rim. He's a dunk contest champion. I'm not entirely sure why he's struggling to get to the rim this season, shooting 40% within 2 feet. It seems like compared to when he was in Portland, he's shooting floaters from, 2, 3 feet away instead of getting all the way to the rim and laying it up or dunking it. Uh, but yeah, Jaylen Brown seems to be the only real guy who's making up for that right now, and it definitely shows in our free throw attempt rate.
Yeah, I think I checked earlier today and we have three, maybe four guys who average more than two free throw let's see, one, two, three, four guys who average more than two free throws a game, which is a scary low number. And Jaylen Brown is taking up six of those. Um, so yeah, I think. I'm just gonna chalk that up to again, like we've had an offensive strategy for years that just does not fit the pieces that we have right now. And I think it's gonna take some time for guys who have been in that system, the Derek Whites, to get away from it. But at some point, I think they're gonna have to get away from it. I think Derek White was able to rely less on slashing in recent years because we straight up didn't need him to slash as much. This year, we will need that. And so I think Anthony Simons came in, and I think early on, like we had a training camp, but still new to this team, trying to figure out his place as the team, the core pillars of the team are trying to figure out what the hell we're doing now without half of the team that we had last year. Um, so I think it is hopefully something that is just kind of as we make adjustments throughout the season, we'll be able to see Anthony Simons get back to. I fully had forgotten that he won that dunk contest, and so
Everyone did. I
yeah,
rewatched it.
it would be nice to be able to see that Anthony Simons. Um, but
It
yeah,
was
I
the
think
dunk contest where everyone said the dunk contest is dead. It was like the most hated dunk contest he won. But there
yeah,
was still he had some cool dunks in there. Um,
yeah. If we could see one in a game, I think that would be
that
great.
would be
But
cool.
it does again. It just feels like he's we're playing like the Celtics of last year without any of the pieces that made that system work. And I think Anthony Simons would fit great in that system, but again, that system is not it this year. And so it's going to take an intentional effort on his part and on the team's part to be like, all right, how do we get him going to the rim in the paint? Peyton Pritchard again. Peyton Pritchard this was maybe his like first or second week in the league. I'll never forget as a rookie. He like I think he won us a game. As a rookie, it was one of his first maybe like 10 games And it was just him in the paint, like grabbing offensive rebounds and putbacks in like the last 2 minutes of a close game. And he got like three or four of them. And so, like, he is undersized for this NBA, but that has not stopped him in the past. I think he has the ability to get into the paint. And again, I think it's more of let's draw some stuff up for him that isn't just drive and kick and drive and see what happens. And if we can get some more like off ball movements for him and get him going downhill, like get the ball into his hands when he's already going downhill and just kind of see what happens there. But I think the free throws have been a definite low light for me.
Yeah, Peyton Pritchard's never drawn that many fouls. I do think he was after 5 games, was our second leading rebounder. So I do appreciate that he has at least tried to be a little bit more physical
He
down
can
there.
exist in that area
Yeah.
is more yeah.
All right. Um, that was your second pick.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll take mine. I know I almost just said the opposite of this, but I'm taking Anthony Simons. His defense has really surprised me this year. Watching him last year in Portland, he reminded me a lot of what we saw from Keontae George on defense, where he was just kind of letting guys blow by him. As soon as he got a bigger defender on him, you could tell he was kind of like, I don't want to deal with this. And either trying to scram switch off or just tissue paper on defense. He
Yeah.
is an athlete. He is long. So you would think he should be able to play defense. And he seems to be this year. He's picking up guys full court. He's trying to stay in front of him. I haven't seen any other team really try to go at him. So I am curious how that works. Like if we go up a team against a team with a big wing and they just decide we're trying to get Anthony Simons, how does he hold up there? Still yet to be seen, but in terms as a team defender, he's been holding up this year. He's also the only guy really shooting it well, shooting 39.6% from three, taking difficult shots too. He's pulling up off the dribble. He's really the only other guy, apart from Jaylen Brown, who's justifying his gravity right now, where teams see him catch the ball 38 feet out and they know they still have to close out on him. So having him on the floor does open up a lot more for us. Um, the rim needs to improve, and I think part of it's just a small sample size. But if he can start being the downhill attacker he was with this defense, then that could completely change our offense.
Yeah, absolutely. I did have Anthony Simons as one of my highlights as well. I think he's helping us stay competitive in games. I think he's when it's starting to get away from us, he's coming in off the bench and just keeping it close and getting us back in it. I would be interested to see, and I don't know, part of me is just kind of Peyton Pritchard is really struggling with his shot right now. Part of me is like, maybe we start Anthony Simons sometimes, get us some more size in the starting lineup, and just let Pritchard like feast on bench defenders a little bit and just find his rhythm and find his confidence again. Because I do love some of the stuff that Simons has been providing. I think like again, he's become like a bailout guy of like shot clock is at 3, get it to Anthony and he's gonna make something happen. And I think that is a big boon for us right now. I also do want your thoughts on is Anthony Simons long for this team?
That's where I was going with it too. That I would worry about starting him for two reasons. One is what it does to Pritchard's confidence. Because if Pritchard's coming into this season as this is my first year as a starter, I've worked my way up every season, more minutes each year, proving I was worth those minutes. Um, would taking that backslide to the bench seem like a failure to him? And if we're trying to get his confidence back to start hitting threes again, I don't know if that's the move on just a personal basis. I think he went 4 of 11 against the Jazz, so probably his best shooting night so far. And if he can play the way he has been with the shooting that we've seen from him the last 3 seasons, I think he's unquestionably the starter on this team. The other reason is I don't know what our plan for Anthony Simons is. Like I said, I've liked what I've seen of him so far. And if we think we can retain him next year for a lower price, I would be open to it. But I don't think he's gonna get 27 million next year. And I think I think the most likely outcome is he's not on the team next year, either because we trade him for salary cap relief during the season or we let him walk in free agency. Um, if we let him walk in free agency, it would drop us below the tax, which really would have two good outcomes for us. One is that we would give us our non-taxpayer mid-level exception, which I think is going to be around 14 million next year,
Yeah.
which if we're trying to do the roster a year ahead of time, which isn't a good idea because there's a lot of variables we don't know right now, but that's probably going to be our starting center, is that 14 million. We can also break that up. Going below the tax also opens up the Kristaps Porzingis trade exception, which is 22 million.
Yeah.
So I don't know if keeping him is really going to be worth it next year if it means we don't have the salary cap flexibility to add another guy. I know it's kind of a roundabout way of answering, but I'd love to keep him if we can. But given the salary cap constraints, I don't see him being long enough for this team that I'm going to upset the apple cart of moving Peyton Pritchard back to the bench and then potentially back to the starting lineup in a month or however long Anthony Simons is still on the team.
Yeah, well, I think what I meant was more uh I think what we have right now is Joe Mazzulla being like, you're asking me the starting lineup before a game, get lost, like kick rocks.
Yeah.
And I think part of that could be like not necessarily like Peyton Pritchard, you're on the bench again, but being like, hey, against this team, we want a little bit more size in the backcourt. This game, Anthony Simons might start and kind of playing that based on matchups more. And still kind of considering like Peyton Pritchard, you're our guy and you know you're our guy. And I think these guys understand the league and kind of the situation and I tend to agree with you. I don't really see Anthony Simons being a long-term Boston Celtic. I think Peyton Pritchard should feel pretty safe that that is his role. But again, just kind of like play like right now, this is a sandbox year, and we should just play around and build stuff and see what works and see what doesn't. And I want to make sure that we're not kind of again built like tiptoeing around kind of egos, which doesn't seem like something Joe Mazzulla has been a part of or cares for in general, but just seeing what works. Like I think Derek White has come off the bench already this year at one point. Um,
I think the size in the backcourt can be a little misleading because even though Anthony Simons is taller than Peyton Pritchard, he's not as good a rebounder. He's
yeah.
not as good guarding up in size. He's not as good on defense. So if we're trying to get a more physical rebounding team, we want Peyton Pritchard out there instead of Anthony Simons. So I don't entirely see the matchup where it would make more sense unless we're saying that we want more shooting out there, in which case then we're kind of accepting that Peyton Pritchard isn't the shooter he used to be, which I don't think we should be doing 7 games into the season.
Yeah, I agree. I think like I do believe Peyton Pritchard is going to break out of this. I think Derek White is also going to break out of his little slump. Like I expect them at least to regress to average, if not get back to where they were. Um, I think right now it's just kind of how are we winning games? Because I do think again it's that Jazz game was extremely winnable. Um, and I think moving forward, I think just as a confidence boost for everybody right now, which I think going into a season where a lot of the headlines were this is a lost season, I think it could be huge to just kind of let's get some W's on the board however we have to and just kind of change the narrative a little bit. Um, Again, like it seems like I don't know. I am a big kind of like I love watching kind of like team cultures develop and watching that. And I think there's something about just like scrappy underdog mentality that like Josh Minot and Ugo Gonzalez are just they're big for this team because they're coming in not unproven. Josh Minot has been in the league, but they have something to prove and they want to win and they want to fight for it and they want to find any way to win. And I think that instilling that kind of culture, however we can, is big.
Yeah, and I think that's another reason I want Peyton Pritchard out there is he's always been a good culture guy. He's always cared, even in garbage time. If you give Peyton Pritchard a basketball, he's going to want to win whatever game he's in, even if it's a 3 minute stretch when we're down by 40. Um, so just having him, Derek White, and Jaylen Brown out there, I always know that lineup's going to care about if they're winning or not. Um, so even if this year ends up being a good draft pick, I still want us to be building culture throughout it. I think we did some lowlights in our highlights, but we can jump there. You want the first pick again?
I will take the first pick, and I'm gonna go straight to fouls. Uh, our defensive strategy this season, at times, and by at a lot of times, most times, has been we're gonna take a gamble on trying to get a steal here, on trying to kind of cut a corner here, on trying to cut somebody off, and when that doesn't work, we will foul. And we are bottom 10 in terms of like fouls that we're committing per game. It just we had built an identity as an organization around defense that again we don't have the defenders that we used to. A lot of it just seems like we're gambling way too much on defense.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And I think we lost some of our more stalwart defenders. Like if Jaylen Brown was going to gamble for a steal, he knew Al Horford was going to be right behind him to pick his man up.
Yep.
So we had a safety net. Jason Tatum never really gambled on steals, but he was so long he could cover like three guys at a time. So you could
Yeah, and I
see a
think he's
Peyton
another like
Pritchard.
backup guy of like it's
Yeah,
tough not having him out there knowing like I can take a little bit more of a chance because JT has ridiculous length behind me.
yeah, 100%. I think part of it's also we have a less experienced team and we're gonna get a harsher whistle because of that. Um, there was a great juxtaposition in this game between what Jaylen Brown could get away with and what Hugo Gonzalez could get away with, I thought, where all of those post-ups on Keontae George in this game, I don't think any of our rookies could have been that physical on offense without
No,
getting
I
called
think
for a push off or a charge. But since Jaylen Brown, he's a former Finals MVP, All NBA player, he can have a little bit more freedom. And when we went from a team with five All-Stars on it, who could gamble a little bit, and if there was some body contact or a slight touch on the wrist with the ball, it was going to get called less than if we have four first-year players out there. So I think it's a little bit of both where there's just bigger ramifications for gambling, and we only have gamblers out there where you really want a Peyton Pritchard and a Derek White able to take gambles, and then three other guys who are going to kind of clean up the gaps in that.
yes. I think that's a very good point. I think I had the thought of like if the referees had badges, Ugo Gonzalez would be in jail for jaywalking, is kind of the whistle that he's been given so far this year, and I understand it. And I also think like there have been games where you've looked at the foul disparities or the free throw disparities, and going back and watching those games, you're like, no, we earn those whistles. Like they have
Yeah.
been committing those fouls. And so I don't think it's necessarily just that we're getting kind of those calls But we are earning those calls as well. And I think that's what's more frustrating about it is, damn, we can't play like clean, coherent defense right now. And I think
Especially with Hugo, I think it's both, where he would be in jail for jaywalking, but he would also be in jail for punching people because he's just been doing that. Like,
yeah, he does like, and again, I think we will, over the course of this podcast, have many, many positive things to say about Ugo. He at times looks like a piece of tissue paper being discarded at Christmas, I believe is the metaphor that I've used. Hugo's 19. He's going to take some time to develop the strength to be able to compete physically at this level without fouling, and I understand that. And I think it just generally speaks to like I'm looking forward to us finding ways to be a more cohesive defense where we're not relying so much on kind of those gambles that have been really biting us so far.
yeah, he's definitely been fouling a lot. He can also stay in front of guys, which I've liked. He's
Yes.
just big enough and he's strong enough to stay in front of drives. He's not strong enough to not get bumped off his spot for a rebound, which
Yes. And
I
that's
think
been
will
a lot of
come once you're in a professional weight room for a few years, that should come along. So I'm not too worried about him long term, but he is kind of the poster boy for fouling that we have right now.
Yes, and at the same time, his hustle and his willingness to take some of those gambles, like his steals give the team a lot of energy, like his outlets. So I think there is a definite upside to it. So I think he's the poster boy for some other good stuff too. But yeah, the standing under the basket fighting for a rebound is not his happy place right now, and I understand that.
All right, I'll jump in and take my first low light, which I feel like is a little bit of an obvious one that we've touched on before, but just the overall defensive rebounding. In past years, we've had guys who were just box out guys on this team. And it's not even like we lost guys who can't get who can get rebounds. I mean, Jalen's usually good for 5 or 6. Peyton Pritchard can go in there and steal a few. Luca Garza's a really good offensive rebounder, but for some reason just can't manage it on the defensive end. It reminds me of something Daryl Morey used to talk about a lot, where he kept re-signing Nene. Um, as just a box out guy. That one of the analytics they tracked in Houston before the rest of the league had it was box outs per 36 minutes, where and team rebounding stats. Because the number of rebounds you get isn't necessarily what's going to determine the number of rebounds your team gets if you're just flying after each one. This year, it just seems like we have a lot of guys that are good at jumping for the ball, but aren't necessarily good at preventing the other team for jumping for the ball. I see it a lot in Keita, where he is right now our best rebounder on the team, so no shade to him. But when he's playing in EuroLeague, he can just jump for balls, and he's so strong that the EuroLeague players just move out of the way. But when you have Yusuf Nurkic on you, it's not going to work. He's one of the strongest men in the NBA and you're not going to move him without planting your feet. Um, this is, I'm going to name, these are just 2 facts that I think should upset you. Um,
Okay, I will try my best to accommodate that.
so Charles Bassey, who was our last cut from the Summer League roster, played his first game last night for the Memphis Grizzlies. He recorded 10 rebounds in 15 minutes. The This is just a list of guys who, if they started the year on the Celtics, would have led the Celtics in defensive rebounding percentage from the year before. Precious Achua, Ben Simmons, and Kai Jones, which I know I texted you about this, maybe too much, but for the listeners, I mistakenly was trying to get Kai Jones on the Celtics. And in my
Personally.
Googling, personally, I have connections in a lot of places. I figured I could make some calls. But in my Googling, I mixed up the professional snowboarder Kai Jones for professional NBA player Kai Jones and had
And
assumed that Kai Jones had taken up professional snowboarding since he was
I
cut
was
from the Charlotte
shocked to get
Hornets.
that text when
It's
you were like, "Yeah, did you know Kai Jones also has like medals in snowboarding?"
Well, I went too far down this rabbit hole where I was like, okay, what snowboarding events is he in this year? What games do we have at those times? Can we make some exceptions? Where, he had there's apparently a snowboarding tournament in February that Kai Jones is going to be a part of. What games do we have on those dates? Like we can make it work for Kai Jones. Um, but no, apparently Kai Jones is quite available, and the snowboarder Kai Jones is only 5'7", so I don't
Yeah,
think
he
he would
can't
help with
box
our
out quite
rebounding.
as well. Yeah.
No. But do you think we need to go outside the team to fix this rebounding problem? Or is it just in figuring out the team rebounding that we have with these guys?
So I will give you credit on this one. Those two facts did upset me.
Yeah,
Um,
as they should have.
yes.
Three
Yeah.
facts, because also that Kai Jones
Also that
isn't
Kai
a
Jones.
professional snowboarder. Should,
Yes. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I am a proponent of looking at the free agent market for help at the center position. I think
Ben
if we
Simmons do
were
anything for you?
so here's the thing,
He gets
and
defensive rebounds.
I'll be completely honest here. I'm gonna look right into the camera and I'm gonna speak right into the mic, and I'm gonna be honest. Ben Simmons won me a fantasy basketball championship, and I will always have a soft spot in my heart for him for that.
He
Uh,
led the Nets in assists last year.
Yeah, the thing is, do I trust Ben Simmons to play basketball games? I'm gonna be honest, I kind of don't. Um, I also am just, it does not, the vibe I've gotten from reports about the teams that he has been on, he doesn't seem like the greatest locker room presence, or kind of like cultural cornerstone, which again, we wouldn't be bringing him on as that, but I don't think that. At the end of the day, I would love some Ben Simmons if Ben Simmons was Ben Simmons on this team, and I just don't know how realistic that is. I think if he were going to be the Ben Simmons that he has been, where he is, again, incredible size, athleticism, he's able to clean up defensively and just take care of rebounding and guarding the opposing team's best player and all of those things. I would love to have him. I think it's also fair to ask, why is he still on the market? Um,
No, and I don't bring that up in all seriousness. I do wonder what the over-under would be on just Missoula crashing out on him within the first game.
I think it would
First
be
quarter, second
really
quarter?
fun to
God.
watch. Um,
No,
I
but I
do
think the
wonder.
more realistic path is somebody with a little less name recognition than Ben Simmons, but who can just go out there and get rebounds. I mean, like Alex Len is probably one of the more obvious names, but just getting another big body in there. I think the counter to that is I do worry about the number of roster spots we have designated to centers right now, where if you're going to keep Xavier Tillman, Luca Garza, Nemise Keita, um, even Chris
Chris Boucher.
Boucher on the roster, do we really want a sixth roster spot dedicated to a guy who's only going to play center?
No, and I would assume that if we're picking somebody up, one of those guys is gonna be giving up their roster
Roster
spot for
spot.
that. Um, and I think part of the the equation this season is going to be which one of these centers show that they need to stay in this conversation. Um, and again, I'm curious to see what happens with Chris Boucher's minutes and see what he can show in those minutes because he does give me. kind of the energy of someone who can absolutely earn his way into more minutes and more games played. Um, but yeah, I do think at some point, and again, I'm curious to see what happens. The buyout market is always really interesting in terms of guys who are bought out after the trade deadline, and most of those guys end up going to contending teams trying to go get themselves a ring. But some of those guys do end up just kind of filtering through and looking for a home, and I think there could be some talent there that falls to us. As far as I know, Mo Bamba is still on the market, which like I've always just had a soft spot for him.
You could sign
Uh,
Mo Bamba and Bol and just be
let's not get
crazy for a year.
let's not get that crazy.
Crazy.
Um,
No, I think that
Taco Fall up to.
oh, Taco Fall's available.
I
We
know he's
could
available. What's he up to?
he's probably just hanging out.
Yeah, so we've got
We
options,
could
but
have the first and second biggest hands in NBA history on one team, which are Taco Fall and Hugo Gonzalez have the
Hugo
first and
Gonzalez really.
yeah, he has the second biggest hands in NBA history behind Taco Fall.
I didn't know that. I thought I remember you had mentioned his hands before, and I thought you had said they were as big as
They're
Kawhi's.
bigger than Kawhi's.
Wow. Okay. All
I'm
right. So,
surprised I haven't mentioned this to you. I've been mentioning it to just strangers on the street.
and I'm sure those conversations have gone very well for you, and
I've been enjoying them, but
I'm glad that I get to have those conversations with strangers on the street now, and I think that's something that you've brought into my life, and I appreciate it. But
Um, I think the problem we're going to run into in getting any of these centers, and I do hate that this is a consideration, is the second apron, because I don't think another team's out there just saying, we wish we had Xavier Tillman on this team. So if we're going to buy him out, that's going to add another 2.6 million to our salary cap. And I just don't know if this front office and this new ownership is willing to go deeper into the salary cap, go deeper over the first apron to be slightly more competitive on the boards in a year where we don't have championship aspirations.
yeah, and I think that's going to kind of be the conversation, and I think a lot of that is going to depend on how we do these first few months going into that kind of buyout season when the free agent market is looking a little bit more settled and kind of figuring that out is what does what is competitive enough and what is kind of again the culture that we're trying to build, even assuming that Jason Tatum is not going to be on a court for the Celtics this year, what are we trying to have ready and set in stone going into next season? And I think that's kind of the consideration. And obviously, it was a frustration to a lot of fans, myself included, when that second apron forced us to gut our team the way we did. Um, but again, trying to play the long game and hoping that ownership does the same thing of we don't have to go try and win it all this year. It would be bad to create a culture that does not functionally care that much about winning basketball games. And then expect next season for us to just kind of pick it up again, I think is unrealistic. So keeping that in mind and just hoping again that second apron is brutal, and I think it will be the downfall of many really well constructed basketball teams that ultimately just fall apart because of the money aspect. um, but yeah, I'm curious to see how that goes, and I hope that we can either that or Luca Garza learns how to grab a defensive board. Like that would also be huge.
We should tell him he's also supposed to get those because he
Yeah,
does
I'm not
seem capable of getting a rebound. But no, completely agree on the culture aspects. What's your next pick? Okay.
So my next pick is going to sound a little controversial as a low light. Uh, right now, the Boston Celtics have the lowest number of turnovers per game in the NBA. And the reason that to me is a low light is because I think I've been able to diagnose how we were able to achieve this. And it is that the Boston Celtics do not pass the basketball. We are also 29th in assists at the moment in the league. Uh, just for context, there are 30 teams in the league. So being the the 29th is not fantastic. When you don't pass the basketball, you don't turn the basketball over, which is great. But again, we've talked a lot about I think it's our offense is stagnating very badly as a result of that. And so again, I phrase it as lowest in turnovers, but really it is just I think we need to find ways to be more creative about how to score. Because the drive, kick, screen, drive, kick, it's just it's not creating a lot of fantastic opportunities for our offense, and it's clearly not leading to a lot of assists, which I think goes to show is we've fallen into some pretty bad kind of isolation or catch and shoot habits, and that's a very limited offense to try to win basketball games.
Yeah, I think we don't know right now how to get high value passes because less passing, less turnovers was another big Maury ball concept, where if you just have James Harden pass it once per possession, you're going to have super low turnovers. And if you just have one great ball handler with four shooters out there, that works. But that's not the team we have right now, where I see it a ton where passing lanes open up, but they're two guys who don't know what to do with it. So we'll have a Derek White drive, and then he'll go to pass to, a Luka Garza in the corner, and either he'll pass to Luka Garza, and then Luka Garza's not quick enough with his three-point shooting that he can get the shot off. So then he has to return it to Derek White at the top of the key and figure out something else to do. And once you do that a few times, eventually just stops passing it out there and either takes a difficult shot or stops in the lane, pivots three times, and passes out to Jalen. Um, so a lot of our guys, part of it's figuring out where to find them. Like I would love it if we could start getting Kata open on some more rolls because I do think he has great hands to catch and has been a great finisher around the rim. So getting him more looks there, getting Josh Minot some better looks on backdoor cuts would be super helpful because he seems efficient in that space. But I also don't want to deny that we have guys who are less effective on offense than last year. And if there's whole areas of the court where they're not effective, passing it to them, they're just going to stall out the possession. Um, so part of it's just an aspect of the personnel we have now, even if there's going to be some opportunity to improve that around the edges. What I don't want is for them to pass it to Josh Minot in the corner like he's going to hit a three just for the risk of having a turnover there.
No, and I think that's kind of my issue that I'm talking about is that it is a very limited kind of mindset in terms of what players can do. And I think that's ultimately what is the low light to me is it doesn't seem to be like part of the thought process of like we can run off ball movements to get guys in motion to create shots that aren't like it has become kind of a mentality of like well can he shoot the three or can he drive to the basket and like remembering that there are things in between that we can create looks that will leave people wide open under the basket like without having to drive or kick or whatever, like setting backdoor screens, having backdoor cuts, incorporating some of those things that, again, that you talked about Maury Ball and James Harden in Houston. A lot of the James Harden in Houston was like James Harden and four guys standing still. And right now it feels like we usually have three guys standing still. And we have one guy who's going to drive or shoot and another guy who's going to set a screen. And that's kind of it. And I think, again, outside of really limiting what we can do, I think it makes it really easy for other teams to plan against us. I think what you're referring to, every team on the scouting report is like, Derek White is going to drive in here and he's not going to want to pass to Luka Garza or Josh Minot. God knows they're not going to run a play to get those guys open off the ball. And I think that is a big problem for us. And that's why it's a low light is just the reluctance to see plays developing outside of the direct ball handler.
I would like to see us encourage some guys to be a little bit more aggressive because right now it seems like we have uh, defenders and offensive players in our system where if you're Anthony Simons, Peyton Pritchard, Derek White, or Jaylen Brown, you're responsible for almost all the offense when you're on the floor. When in the preseason, we saw a lot more of Hugo running pick and roll. We saw a couple Nemes Keita post ups. We saw Nemes Keita post passing out of the high post, which he does a lot in EuroLeague, where we're not going to find these guys kind of special talents on offense, like we talked about earlier, if when they get on the floor, their whole job is just, play defense and rebound, which is what we need from them. But it does look a lot of times like when we're on the fast break and Hugo or Josh Minot gets the ball, a lot of times they're passing backwards to reset around a Derek White or a Jaylen Brown. So I definitely think our offense could use a little bit more freedom from those guys, but I still think that passing to them for the sake of ball movement's gonna end in a lot of stickier possessions.
Yeah, and I think that's why my priority is less like get the ball into Josh Minot's hand and more can we draw up plays that gets Josh Minot with the ball in his hands open going towards the basket. And right now it doesn't seem like that's a consideration of like you can get guys open without again, just kind of thinking about like the old Celtics like Avery Bradley or Jay Crowder or those guys that carried teams to like conference finals as role players were never like super multifaceted offensive players. Were never Avery Bradley towards the end a little bit, but like there were
Mr.
a lot of
Backdoor
guys that
Cut.
Mr. Backdoor Cut. Like there were a lot of guys who were just finding ways to get open. And right now it kind of feels like if you're not like if you're open, we will find you and take the shot. If you're not open, like you're out of luck. And I think that's the element that I'm missing is like we can get guys open in ways that doesn't require them to handle the ball or to like use skills that they don't have. It's more of again like a strategy, a scheming, a drawing up plays, an execution, and at the end of the day, like a hustle thing.
Yeah, I think we're a little bit more constrained just on who can dribble, but if there's ever a time to experiment with those, it's right now. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't lose to a well, knock on wood. We're playing the Wizards later this week, but it's hard to lose to a worse team than the Utah Jazz. All right,
Not when Keontae George is being an all-star like that.
I'll take my last pick. I'll phrase this one as a question. Which of these stats do you think is real and which do you think we're going to recover from?
Okay.
Okay. Um, First, Derek White and Peyton Pritchard shooting. Derek White's shooting 25% from three, Peyton Pritchard shooting 18% from three.
That's not real.
Or Anthony Simons finishing, shooting 40% at the rim, last 3 years shot 65% at the rim. Are both of those fake, or is one gonna actually be a problem this year?
I don't know that both of those are fake. I think I say that Derek White and Peyton Pritchard shooting is fake in the sense that I find any universe where those numbers stay where they are hard to believe. I think those guys are just too good and have been doing this too long. They will regress to the mean. Um, the Anthony Simons one feels a little bit less of, for lack of a better term, luck. Like right now, Derek White and Peyton Pritchard, some of those shots are that they're taking are good shots and they're having bad luck. Like for whatever reason, a slump, they're not in a rhythm, whatever, they'll find that. I'm confident of that. The Anthony Simons one goes back to what we just talked about a little bit of what kind of opportunities is he getting at the rim to put the numbers that low? And I think in Portland, were they running different sets for him? And was he finding different situations where he was in the paint that were having he was having tremendous success with that he's just not having here? And again, it kind of comes down to like if you're on the Boston Celtics and you're shooting a basketball in the paint, how did you get there? And there aren't that many options for how it could have happened. And I think in Portland, he was maybe given a little bit more freedom, or they ran a little bit of a different type of offense that gave him different types of looks there that he might find more success with. And then I think it becomes incumbent on us to see how can we get him those looks. Let's like take a look and find out like how often was he getting to the paint and finishing at the rim with the ball in his hands the whole time? How often was he getting the ball on a cut? How often was it a pick and roll with him as the role or like finding those different areas where it can be about utilizing him the most effectively in situations that he's comfortable with.
Yeah, I mean, part of me wants to blame it on spacing because
You
this
can
year
do that too.
I don't know that I can. Because our spacing's not great, but have you watched the Portland Trailblazers the last few years? They're not exactly a better spacing team. Like he
Bunch of
definitely
snipers
had
over
to
there,
deal
yeah.
with like two non-shooters at times. He definitely had to deal with being the best offensive player on his team those last 3 years, where he was the top name on the scouting report. That there's no way this is a less conducive environment to finishing at the rim when he has a Peyton Pritchard and a Jaylen Brown next to him most of the time when he's on the court.
I do think that might be a little bit of
To
an
my
oversimplification of just like just because they didn't have great shooters in Portland doesn't mean that the paint was always clogged if they were doing other things to draw defenders out of the paint. And I think that's where like the Celtics offense has become so one-dimensional. Like we are 29th in three-point percentage and first in threes attempted. There is no other team in the league that is this bad at something and chooses to do it so consistently. Um, and so, like, even if we're taking all these threes and theoretically we have the shooters to back it up, I think it's pretty easy for opposing teams to kind of pack the paint against us in a lot of situations where they're like, they're going to drive and kick and we can still just kind of stay home.
I don't know because I mean they still respect it's we're only 7 games into the season. Teams aren't sagging off of Derek White. They're not sagging off of Peyton Pritchard at this point. To my eye, it looks much more like Anthony Simons isn't quite as fast as he was last year in Portland, or maybe not quite as aggressive, because he used to look a lot more like what Keontae George looked like last night, where he would blow by a defender and finish with like 2 feet of space at the rim. Where here, when he's driving to the rim, he's kind of staying on the defender's hip and then finishing off balance. So I don't know if that's a confidence thing. This is the first time he's coming off the bench in quite a few years, or if it's possibly some sort of minor injury where he just doesn't have the boost that he might have in some of his better games last year.
Yeah, I mean, it could be. I think that seeing the lack of kind of athleticism, especially from former dunk contest champion Anthony Simons, has been
Always
jarring.
remember, dunk
Yes,
contest champion.
I'll
Beat
never
Obi
forget that.
Toppin by 1 vote.
Oh God. Oh,
It
that
was
dunk.
yeah, it was 3-2.
Yep.
Very controversial.
Um, no, but I think hoping that he gets that explosiveness back, but also it might just be that I don't know. I really keep going back to like our play style, and it might be like it might feel better for him to just be like a shooter. Like on the Boston Celtics, if you're a shooter and he's been doing well in that role again, like he's who we go to bail out. And he's encouraged, I'm assuming, to take as many threes as he wants. And that might feel less physically demanding than driving into the paint the way he did in Portland. And that might be affecting the way that he's done it or how often he does it or his confidence level or any of those things. But I don't know. I don't expect that number to stay that low. I don't know that it will get back to where it was in Portland.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I'll say to that is he's a great catch and shoot guy for us right now, but catch and shoot guys usually don't get paid 27 million a year. Um, so if he's hoping to get a big contract in the offseason, that number's probably got to go up. Um, that's the last pick of the draft. Let me ask you a quick question before we drop. What does the ideal end to the Celtics season look like? Is it a pick? Is it a seed? Is it development from a certain player? What's your criteria of success?
My criteria of success is I mean, I want to make the playoffs every year. I am never going into a season hoping for a pick, hoping that we do bad enough to get a certain that just is not in my philosophy. I think again, coming up as a Celtics fan with teams that were never really expected to be great and were great, even if they weren't all-time great. Um, I don't. I go back and forth on even if he feels healthy and ready, I don't know if I want to see Jason Tatum play this year. Um, Again, like I'm coming off of a back surgery and like understand very personally like how real it is to like be worried about a re-injury of something like that. Um, so I don't know again, it seems like by all indications, I know that Kevin Durant got asked about it after the Rockets game and was like, it's crazy that he's already dunking and doing all this stuff. Um, so it seems like his recovery is going really well and really grateful for that and excited about that. I think it is fundamentally like I want to see this team in a position to really like thrive next year. Whether or not like whatever we accomplish this year and hopefully like we surprise everybody and go on a big run. That would be great regardless, even if we don't, even if we end up at the top of the lottery, whatever happens, I want to go into next year feeling confident in our depth and the rest of our players because I'm gonna feel confident about Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum and Derek White and Peyton Pritchard. I want I want to say three and ideally four guys that I'm like, that's a guy next year. Doesn't have to be an all-star. I'm not hoping for anything like that, but like whether it's Josh Minot, whether it's Ugo like taking a step forward and becoming someone we can kind of rely on a more consistent basis to not get 5 fouls in 15 minutes or whatever. Whether it's Keita, like, oh, that is a starting caliber center in the league. Um, but being able to have like three or four of those guys that we can slot around our core and be like, going into next season, I feel good about that.
You know who looks
How
like a
about
guy
you?
next year?
He,
Brockton's own AJ DeBonsa. He looks
ooh,
like a guy next year. No, the one thing I'll say about Tatum coming back is I know an Achilles injury is different from a lot of other injuries, where the Achilles tendon is what activates your calf muscle. And part of what's so devastating about it is when you need 6 months where you don't activate a muscle, uh, it gets smaller and starts to die. Uh, so him getting out of that boot as soon as he did is a huge sign. And I really do trust the medical team around him to make the right decision for him. So getting as active as soon as possible is going to help him. And if they feel the best way to do that is to keep him off the court and just, in the weight room doing the right amount, or if they feel that getting him on the court so that he can, activate that ankle in as real to gameplay situations as possible, I can also see that being the right path for his recovery. this is like an outlier recovery where he had the injury at Madison Square Garden, which
And was having
is
surgery same day.
yeah, within hours at the best hospital for Achilles surgery in the world, which is 2 blocks away.
Yeah.
Um, so if he's able to come back and the medical team around him says it's good, I would want him to come back just to get some on the court reps. Not even like I don't think we should bring him back to try to make a big playoff run, but if he can come back to try to get his legs under him so that it's not a big transition next year when he comes back and he can hit the ground running, then I'd support that. Um, yeah. So that's all for the first episode. Thanks for jumping on.
Yeah, that's Jay, and I'm confused. Thanks for listening, guys.